Okay, hey, we are continuing on our We Are series, and we've been having this conversation over the last couple of weeks about who we are. Who are we as the church? Who are we as the people of God? And we've started journeying from, through Genesis. And Pastor Ben shared the last 2 weeks about what it is to be the image of God. What does it mean to be the Imago Dei? And if you didn't hear that sermon, honestly, it's one of my favorite sermons. I just thought it was killer. So you can go onto YouTube and listen to that. It's really important that you understand how you were designed by God, how God breathed his life and his breath into you, and that you have the blueprint, right? Jesus Christ is the blueprint for us when it comes to understanding our identity. So get along to YouTube and listen to that. And then last week he shared about what does it mean to be a people of promise. Today we're going to talk about what does it mean to be a royal priesthood. These words might be new to you. You were like, maybe that's the first time you've actually heard that we are, as the church, as people of God, we are called a royal priesthood. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, it says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into this wonderful light." This is an affirming passage of scripture for us. Our heart is throughout this series that you as the people of God would feel encouraged. I think it's so easy to walk around this world like head down, looking down, and not feeling a sense of confidence with you. And it's easy to kind of try and find self-confidence, but to find God confidence, that's a totally different thing. And so we want you to find your God confidence over this series. We want you to be able to come into this place and leave this place with a godly confidence that actually shapes and changes you to live a life that affects those around you. And so you are a royal priesthood. Why don't you say this? I am a royal priesthood. Okay, you could have said it more positively, but I think you did pretty well. Growing up, I grew up obviously in a big family. For those of you who don't know, I am one of 7 children. I'm number 5 because I didn't make the cut for oldest, second oldest, youngest, second youngest, or middle. It's just number 5. So I have 2 brothers and 4 sisters, and we loved to play dress-ups. My siblings and I, my sisters, we were kind of we loved playing dress-ups, but we also loved getting into the dirt. And I think that's maybe just millennials where we played outside a lot more. You make dirt soup. Did anyone do that? You go outside and you have this pot that your mum's been hoping to use to fill some beautiful pot plant, and you grab some leaves and you make some dirt type of potion or something. I don't know, dress up, play. That's the world that I grew up in. And we loved playing dress ups. We loved playing pretend. And I've got a photo of my family, some of them. Look at that. Beautiful photo. So you may not know this, my family's quite interesting. This is me, if you didn't notice, the double chin. Look at that glorious accessory. So this is the start of dress-ups for my family. That's my sister on the left. My mum gave her a boy haircut. She hates this photo because she thinks she looks like a boy. And she dressed up as Sherlock Holmes. So, my brother David, who's here today, he's hiding away. He's a Harry Potter. Yeah, we were that Christian family. And then my little sister is Cinderella. And I don't know if anyone's seen this. There was a show called Merlin, and it was a mini-series, had Sam Neill in it, and there was this evil character called Mab. And I was such this good little girl, but I was I'm going to be the bad girl. So that's me dressing up. I have another photo that shows how much dress-ups and pretending and being someone that, plays as princesses or princes. Can you go to the next photo, Josh? So this is my daughter Alice as a princess. And this is, I don't know if you recognize that beautiful face next to my daughter. This is Henry Shelton, who is at the back hiding away at the moment. So Alice loved to have dress-up parties. She just wanted a tiara. She didn't want to dress up anymore. Henry, you can't really tell, but he went as Jack Frost from the Guardians. And Alice was obsessed with Henry. She wouldn't talk to anyone else but him, but she loved being a princess. What's the next slide we got, Josh? And this is Levi. He is the dude from Pokemon. I don't know what his name is. Ash. And then, I don't know if you recognize Charmander there, but that's your friendly neighborhood host team leader, Luke Gartenbein, in the Charmander suit. So we kind of like instilled dress-ups in our family, and I think we've got one more. This is my little Alice, who's sitting front row. She's so adorable, and she just always wanted to dress up as a princess. Like, there was this desire in her to, like, be a princess. Like, Disney has, like, honestly made such a profit off this. You can turn those slides off. I had another photo of Ben and I on my 21st where I dressed up as Belle from Beauty of the Beast, and guess what he dressed up as? But I'm like, I'm going to save that for another day. We had this massive beast costume, and he dressed up. But we like the idea of playing pretend. It's instilled in us as children, right? It's like, oh, you dress up. Like, some of you have probably spent like $150 on like a princess outfit for your niece or your daughter that they're going to wear a couple of times because it's way too itchy. And you're just going to like hand it down to the secondhand store, and there's $80 or $150 just gone down the drain because they grow out of it really quick. But we have this desire to dress up. We have this desire to pretend. We have this desire to be princes and princesses. It's funny how all the Disney princesses are always like, you know, like Aladdin, like street rat. But, you know, all the ladies are like these beautiful princesses. I don't know how it values men. But anyways, that's another side story. But we love to be kings and queens and princes and princesses. Does anyone know who Mary Elizabeth Donaldson is? Mary Elizabeth Donaldson. During the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, Mary Elizabeth Donaldson met a lovely guy at a bar, and they started dating, they started seeing each other, and they fell in love, and they've been married for 20 years now. And what's so special about Mary is that the man that she met in the bar was the Crown Prince Frederik of Denmark. You might know her as Queen Mary. In 2000, all the single ladies in Australia were like, I can meet a prince in a bar. They were like, this is possible for me. Like, I can become a royal overnight if I just, you know, hit the bar. Which I think some people still have this illusion that maybe that's where they're going to find their Prince Charming, and so often it falls short. But there's this real-life fairy tale of someone becoming a royal overnight. And I think all of us have this kind of desire to be like, oh, what would it be like to be like, you know, a royal? What would it be like to be royalty? And all of the hope of the single girls in Australia skyrocketed and then plummeted because they realized that's a once-in-a-lifetime story. But there is this deep desire in us, isn't there? That's formed in us from when we're young, that we want to be royal. We want to know what it is to be royal. And here we have this statement that we are a royal priesthood. And we can look at our circumstances and be like, well, what's really so royal about me? Like if that's what royalty is, like, what does it say about the life that I'm living? And we hear this term, royal priesthood, and we ask ourselves, well, what is royal about us? What makes me royal? And if only someone had actually told us that royalty isn't something that you dress up as. It's not something that you pretend to be. But we have this idea that we have to pretend and dress up to be what we have already been called to be. So what does it mean to be a royal priesthood? First things we need to understand is that we are royal. Now, that might look different in the way that you expect it to look based upon, you know, the monarchy or whatever. But God actually calls us royal. We are royal. We must not allow ourselves to play dress-ups with this. We must not allow ourselves to pretend that we are a certain way. We actually have to understand that we are a certain way. To be royal means that we have an understanding that it's actually not about our behavior, but our identity first. See, we could pretend and practice and do the things that look like a royal priesthood would do, but if we don't have an understanding of it in the very core of our identity, then we're just playing pretend. Before we act a certain way, we must understand that we are a certain way. It's not what we do first, it's who we are first. Your identity as a royal priesthood is so fundamental to understanding that we are royal. I am royal. It's a weird thing to say because sometimes we think that it makes us sound arrogant, but I actually think there's a way that we can declare this that actually projects a godly type of confidence, not a self type of confidence. It's not that you behave like royalty or that you look like royalty, but you are royal. And from that place, then all behavior flows. Why are we royal? Romans 8 tells us that we have been adopted as sons and daughters, that we can call out to God, Abba Father, that we are adopted into a kingdom. Why are we royal? Because we have been adopted into a kingdom, God's kingdom. And while our identity has failed short of this time and time again, God just adopts us in, not as slaves, as sons and daughters. Romans 8 says, you're not slaves, you're sons and daughters. You actually have a royal heritage that you get to claim and a royal legacy that you get to leave. Being royal is actually about belonging. That's what it means when we say that we are a royal priesthood. We belong. We have a sense of belonging. We belong to the kingdom of God. We belong as sons and daughters. As Christians, royalty does not then start with projecting regality, but with accepting adoption. That's what we need to understand. We first accept adoption into this royal kingdom that God has invited us into. So understanding that we are royal starts with our identity, not our behavior. It's not about behave a certain way and then you will be a certain way. It starts with our identity. And if it started with our behavior, we would just be playing pretend. We'd just be dressing up. And I don't know if you've seen like dress ups, but they're not as good as the real thing. They never quite cut it. They're not as good. We would just be playing pretend, but we're not meant to be playing pretend. We need to understand that. We need to understand our identity. And in understanding your identity, then you start to see how it shapes your life. Your identity will actually start to shape your life. You think about it. The way that you think about yourself, the way that the things you declare about yourself shapes how you then interact in the world. It shapes your relationships. It shapes how you go about your work. It shapes how you hold yourself. It shapes how you interact as the body of Christ. Understanding your identity shapes the way you live. So if you believe you're royal, guess what? You'll start behaving like it. That's the good thing. If you started with behavior, you probably would never believe it. You'd just be striving in a strength that is not yours. But when you understand your identity, behavior flows out of that place. So people think that if they change the way they look, if they change the way they act, if they change their habits, if they change these external factors, then it'll change the internal. They're looking from the outside in, but we have actually called to be people that live from the inside out. That's what it means to understand our identity as royal, is that we have this inside-out perspective. Jesus says in Matthew, he says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. He's talking about an inside-out perspective. And Jesus is challenging us that we would not be people that would change the external nature and hope that it makes its way inside, but that we would be people that have an inside-out transformation that changes us on the outside. It's not the other way around. This is the point. Title without transformation is an outside-in perspective. We have been called to be a people who live from the inside out, transformed. Like, think about it. Title without transformation. We see it. It's a fallacy. It's fake. It's pretend. It's like playing dress-ups. And it doesn't look so good. We've been called to be a people that start from the inside out. And the beauty is about when we understand our identity as a royal priesthood and we apply this inside-out perspective, then it makes its way out. You have a change within you, an understanding within you that you are royal. Watch as it affects the way that your relationships shift and change. Watch as it affects the way that your confidence changes in this world. So many of us hear these words and we hold on to them with hope, not with reality. And I actually think that we need to be a church that understands that this isn't just something we hope for, it's a reality we have here and now. That you can declare and say, I am a royal priesthood, and that has changed me from the inside out. I am not someone that just has title without transformation. I am someone that transformation testifies to my title. Your transformation, the inside out transformation, is evidence of your title as royal. Isn't that a beautiful thing? That you actually affirm your identity as royal by the transformation that is being outworked in your life. And guess what? It takes time. Like, so many of us are like, well, I just want to be here now already. And I just want to encourage you. You know, it's just like working a muscle. Sometimes it takes time, and some days you feel tired and sometimes you feel strong, but there will be a day where you just see that transformation in you and you look back and you're like, wow, look how far I've come. Like I didn't even notice the steps I were making, but when I look back 5 years ago and I look who I am now, God's transformed me and I didn't even know it. And that's the beauty of transformation by God, is that it's so full of ease that you don't even feel the stress of it. But when we strive out of a sense of not knowing our identity as royal, that's when it starts to struggle. That's when we start to feel every burden of our striving. No, we are called to be inside out royalty. That's who we're called to be. To be royal starts with our understanding of our identity, but it does not end there. That's the beautiful thing about identity. It never ends with just understanding, but it continues on with practice. It's like when people watch reels on Instagram and it's like DIY reels. It's like, oh, that's a really good idea. I should do that, but never actually do it. You're just absorbing content, but never actually practicing anything. It's like, wow, they're making sourdough. That's how you make sourdough, but you never practice making sourdough. Shout out to Pastor Dan. He's been making really nice sourdough lately. Because he saw something on a reel somewhere probably, and he's like, that's a really great idea. And he didn't leave it there. It actually invaded his life to the point that his house always smells like bread. That's the type of life you want to live. That if you see someone baking something on a reel, your house soon starts smelling like bread. That's the life that is a transformed life. And if you want sourdough, you can talk to Pastor Dan after the service. He's going to start making it for communion. He's going to start making it for the cafe. We are called not to be slaves. Romans 8 says we're not slaves. We're sons and daughters of a kingdom. We're royal. And our title is not just a title. There is evidence of that title being alive in our life by the transformation that we are living in every day. And can I tell you, it's okay that you may not feel like you are there just yet, but you're taking a step. You are allowing God to transform you every day, but the transformation does not diminish the fact that He's called you royal. Just because it takes time the time it takes does not eliminate the title He's given you. To be royal is to partner title with transformation. This is important because transformation actually reveals another facet of royalty, and that is authority. Royals understand their authority. It literally is part of what it means to be royal, is to have authority. Authority. When you understand your identity as someone who's called to be royal, you start to understand the authority that you've been given. In the book of Exodus, we read about the establishment of the priestly order of things. We see how the tabernacle worked and the temple worked. And if you're not aware of all of that, then come chat to one of our pastors. We'll give you some great resources to help you understand a little bit of Israel's history when it came to their worship practices. But what we would have this high priest, and they were the ultimate, they were the authority as of the priesthood. And they wore specific things. They had specific things that they would wear. And it wasn't just to look fancy. It was also to actually symbolize something. And there's a couple of things that I want to speak to. But they had this turban, this headdress that they would wear. The high priest had this headdress. And it was made of fine linen. And inside of it was this plate of gold. And it had something inscribed in it. But this headdress, this turban, spoke to the authority. It symbolized the authority of the high priest. And what's interesting about this authority is what was inscribed on this gold plate. And we read that it says that it was holy to Jehovah. This is what was in the headdress of the high priest. The authority of the high priest, represented by this headdress, had this gold plate inscribed with the words holy to Jehovah, set apart for God, holy to God. And the authority of the high priest held validity because they were empowered by the understanding of whose authority they were under. They had this understanding that their authority as high priest came under something. And this is what you need to understand when understanding authority and when trying to operate in authority, is the authority that you have is one that is set apart for God's purposes, that it comes under the authority of God, which means that you are not the ultimate authority, but you are empowered by the ultimate authority. And I can tell you which way is better. If you were to be the ultimate authority, then your morality would be the ultimate authority that determined how you would use your authority. Whereas we have a high priest, a new high priest. Hebrews says we have a new high priest, Jesus Christ. We have a new high priest, and we sit under his authority, which means it's not about our morality that we operate under, but it's about his. And him being sinless and perfect and being God means that we can operate in an authority that doesn't require us to be perfect, but to be under his authority, to be under his holiness. Authority that does not understand its God-given purpose is a false authority, and false authorities are kingdoms destined for rubble. But you have been given a true authority. Let me give you a couple of examples of what it is to have false authority, whereas it is to have true authority. Number one, false authority relies on the preservation of self. That's what false authority does. It relies on the preservation of self, whereas true authority relies on the one who holds things together. Colossians 1, verse 16 to 17 says this, "For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." False authority hopes to preserve oneself, whereas true authority understands who holds all things together. Which means our certainty then isn't relying on our strength to make everything hold together, but on the understanding of the one that spoke a word and the heavens and the earths were formed, that authority is that we sit under. That's a far greater authority to sit under, that the one who literally is holding your atoms together in your body right now, the one that is causing you to be able to breathe in and breathe out, to feel, to touch, to hear, to see. But so often we try to revert back to this false authority where we try to preserve things in our own self. But I don't know about you, but I've never spoken a word and the heavens and the earth were created. So I understand whose authority that I want to be under. I don't want to preserve myself. That's going to fail. But if I trust in the one who holds all things together, man, my life is sure. Number two, false authority relies on self-dominance, whereas true authority relies on the understanding of God's sovereignty. When King David was established as king over Israel, he became what is known as the reigning sovereign. He was the one in charge. He got to call the shots. He had all power under him. And he had this desire as king, he had this desire to build a place for the Ark of the Covenant, which was this tangible presence of God. He wanted to build a place for it to reside. And that's a good desire. I want there to be an excellent place for the presence of God. And God said to him that it wasn't going to be him that builds it, but it would be someone in his household. Now, David could have used his authority, right? No one's keeping him accountable at this point right now. He could say no to anyone that comes along and tries to keep him accountable. So this is just the voice of God speaking to David. And David could have used his authority to go ahead and build a place for the ark and gotten all the glory for actually building something good for God. Well, I did it. I made this amazing thing for the Lord. Look what I've done, but it would have been out of disobedience to the Lord. Instead, this is what he says in 2 Samuel 7. Okay, remember, David is the reigning sovereign, and this is what he says to God. Verse 18 to 19. "Who am I, sovereign Lord? And what is my family that you have brought me this far? And as if this were not enough in your sight, sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. And this decree, sovereign Lord, is for a mere human. This is the reigning champ of the world. Understanding his authority is not the ultimate sovereign authority. He submits rather, instead of promoting his own desire and relying on his own self-dominance to get what he desires to be a good thing, he trusts in the understanding of God's sovereignty. See, false authority will always rely on self-dominance. And we can dress it up to make it look good. Whereas true authority relies on the understanding of God's sovereignty. 3 times, the reigning sovereign says, sovereign Lord. To, yes, declare to the Lord, but also to probably testify, to say to his own self, who am I? In the light of sovereign Lord, who am I that you would look at me? That you would even consider my house to be able to build a place for your presence. Number 3, false authority protects self, where true authority advocates for others. False authority protects self, whereas true authority advocates for others. We read in Matthew 8 the story of the centurion soldier coming to Jesus. This centurion soldier, this someone of status, this someone who's noteworthy in the Roman world, and he comes on behalf of his servant and says, Jesus, would you heal my servant? And Jesus says, sure, I'll come with you now. And the centurion soldier says, you don't need to come, just say the word. Just say the word. And Jesus acknowledges the faith in this centurion. And he says this statement, for I too am a man under authority. And we see the authority of the centurion soldier in this moment and how this authority actually instills great faith in those hearing. And isn't it interesting in his understanding of his authority what he chose to do with it? This is a centurion soldier. He's high in the ranks of the Roman military. And what does he choose to do with this authority and this power? He advocated. He advocated. True authority doesn't see the power of God as something to contain, but actually something to release over others. And I think so many of us have this conflict in our hearts where we want to have an understanding. We get mixed up in our value and our identity. And we go, well, now that I know my value and identity, I'm going to keep all of this for myself. But true authority actually sees what it has and advocates on behalf of others. The conversation about the centurion's authority happened because he carried a spirit of advocacy and brought the need of one to the ultimate authority. And in the midst of Jesus' authority, a miracle happened. That's what true authority does. It advocates for others to encounter the ultimate authority of Jesus Christ, which is where miracles start to actually pour out. This is the authority we've called to be in. And fourth, false authority seats itself in pride, whereas true authority humbly lays down its life. And we know this passage well, Philippians 2:3-11. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others in your relationships with one another. Have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing. By taking the very nature of a servant, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. False authority seats itself in pride, whereas true authority humbly lays down its life. Often the idea of being someone that lays down your life is something that we can kind of find glory in. When we think about like martyrs that have actually laid down their life, we can kind of see that they have there's this glory that we put towards them. But laying down one's life isn't actually about going out in glory, but giving him all the glory. We realize that when we understand true authority. This isn't about going out in glory. This is about understanding that we are giving him all glory. As sons and daughters that are adopted into royalty, that testifies to this identity through transformation. That's who we are. Do we understand what it is to have authority? You have been called royal so that you would know your value, so that you would testify to it through transformation, and that you would operate in his authority. What for? For the purpose of being his priesthood. What does it mean to be a priesthood? What did the priesthood do? They were the ones, the mediators between God and the people, to actually bring about the presence of God. And we know now that there is no divide between God and humanity. The divide is broken. So what does it mean to be a priesthood today? It's to be a people that continue to bring a life of sacrifice and worship to him. How? How do we do this? Leviticus 19 verse 2 says this. This is what God says when giving this instruction to his people as to how to be this priesthood. He says this, I am holy, so be holy. Isn't it interesting that he doesn't start with a list of do's and don'ts? He doesn't start with, oh, well, don't do this and don't do this, but just, I am holy, be holy. See, God doesn't just accept us. He accepts us and makes us acceptable to be a part of his purpose as his priesthood. Holiness then isn't about behavior, but about becoming. Holiness isn't about behavior, but about becoming. Becoming what? Becoming like God. That's what holiness is like. I think for so much of my life, I thought holiness was behaving a certain way and making sure I did the list of things to do, not realizing that before any of that, it is about becoming like God, becoming the nature of God. To be a priesthood is to be a people who care so much about the holiness of God that we're actually transformed into it. Do we care about the holiness of God? I don't think that question is asked a lot. Do we actually care about the holiness of God? In the Old Testament, how the priesthood would approach God in their worship and in their sacrifice was with excellence. Why? Because they actually cared about the holiness of God. And I wonder if maybe because we know that we have direct access to God, we've kind of brought God maybe not an offering of excellence, but just of mediocrity. That maybe we've seen the veil being torn and the access to the nature of God being so available that we've gotten so comfortable and familiar with it. You think about it within your own family, or when you maybe you're married, or maybe you're dating, and like you've seen it on rom-com movies for sure, but like that dating period, like there's such a care to like how you date. I'm gonna make my girl feel the best, and like I'm gonna give her these flowers, and like there's this excellence that goes into that dating period, and then you get comfortable with each other, and then it's like, oh, it's your birthday tomorrow. Do you want to do something? Like, and it's not because the love isn't there. Please hear me. The love is there. It's so there. I just sometimes think that in the way that we approach God's holiness, it's because we've become so familiar with the fact that we get full access that we've stopped caring about it. That we've stopped caring about the holiness of God. But if only we understood that if we care about the holiness of God, we're actually caring about what we're becoming. We're actually caring about who we are becoming as his priesthood. Caring about the holiness of God isn't a list of things to do's and things not to do. It's about understanding who we are becoming. We are becoming like God. We become holy. Do we care about the holiness of God? Do we bring excellence in how we approach him with our worship? Do we bring excellence in how we approach him with our praise? Do we bring excellence how we sacrifice and lay our lives down on the altar, knowing that he laid his life down on an altar we would never be able to even do? When we care about the holiness of God, we care about who we are. We care about our identity. We care about our value. We don't just facilitate. We're not just facilitators of the holiness of God. we actually get to become it. We get to operate in it. If we just think we're here to facilitate something, then we've misjudged God's view on us. Then we don't understand truly what it is to be a royal priesthood. We don't truly understand our value. The authority of God and the holiness of God coexist. Think about it. When you understand the holiness of God, the greater the authority you have to call a move of God in this place. The holiness of God and the authority of God must coexist within us. See, it's from our understanding of God's holiness that we start to operate in the authority of Jesus with more confidence. It's the authority to command a move of God within this world. It comes from the revelation that there's been a move of God within us. So when we see that move of God within us, we are built up with more confidence to go into the world, speak with authority, and declare the praises of Him who has called us out of the darkness into this glorious light. We stand with confidence as we declare, because we understand what it is to become like God. If we thought holiness was dependent on us, then our authority would be limited to our morality, and our morality sucks. But our authority is not dependent on our morality. It's dependent on the fact that the scriptures say there is a new high priest that sits above us, that has all authority, that stands with no sin, that has the moral, He is the moral compass for us. This is what we do when we declare the praises of Him who has called us out of darkness into light. The good news is who we are accepted by God, and we are made acceptable by God. So we have authority not just to facilitate a place for God's holiness to be, but to operate within God's holiness, to operate within the very presence of a living God. That is the authority that you have, church. Do you understand the God confidence starting to rise up in you? The revelation that you need to have about what it is to be a royal priesthood comes from the abundance of a transformed life that speaks to the darkness in this world and sees the light come through. Why don't you stand with me? You have been accepted and you have been made acceptable. You are royal. You are being transformed from the inside out to be carriers of the holiness of God in becoming like God. 1 Peter 2 verse 9. Why don't you just close your eyes as I speak this over you? And I want you to really, truly receive this as the Lord declaring this over you this morning. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. What for? So that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. You have authority to declare. Church, you have authority to declare. Declare what? The praises of Him. The testimony of what was once dark is now light, which was once a slave is now a son and daughter, which once was a captive is now free. What is it to be a holy priesthood? It's to understand your identity as someone who is becoming like God. That you are not just title without transformation, that you actually have an authority to bring a change and a move in this world because you've understood it in your own life. So we're going to practice what it is to declare with authority this morning. Why? Practice makes permanent. And we need to be a church that goes into this world with Christ as our head, the ultimate authority, with the confidence and the understanding that in our own holiness we are nothing, but praise be to God for Jesus, that we could declare to this world that He is making a move, that He is present, that He is here. And so we're going to sing this song again. We're going to sing this song, That's the Power. And honestly, church, this is a time to test the declaration of your praise that is partnered with an authority that understands its identity. So we're going to sing. Be encouraged. Be full of courage. Be strong. Be brave. We are a royal priesthood. We have authority over the darkness because of him. So as we sing, let it be a deep declaration in your soul that has an understanding of your value and your identity. Are you ready? Are you ready? Come on, let's speak out in authority. Let's sing in authority. Let's believe again that we have been called a royal priesthood. Let's declare it this morning.